Alright folks, this is a story told by me by a man named Mr. Nori that I met a few years ago, so I'm just going to read it, what he told me. I wrote it down. So this is what Mr. Nori told me. He said, I live in a small town called Lynette, Alabama, and on one side of me lives Mr. Sunridge, and on the other side of me lives Mr. Lockton. Both of my neighbors have some of the best landscapes going on in their front yards. Mr. Lockton has a fountain in his front yard in which water flows from the trunk of a massive elephant statue that he has overlooking his fountain. Overlooking his pond, I'm sorry. He said his pond. His lawn is always pristine, and he has gold stepping stones leading up from the sidewalk to his front porch of his colonial style house. He still can't let go of his love for the wicker style furniture on his front patio. I've never been inside his home, and every blue moon you see a visitor come and go. The house has one of those curved type driveways that takes you a few feet from the front door, like you see in the old movies. That is where Mr. Lockton parks his 3 vehicles, one of which is a 1939 Alfa Romeo 8C Spider, another one is his 87 Buick Grand National X, and the third one, his favorite to drive, was his 78 Volkswagen T2 camper. He seemed to take this out for most of his errands. Pretty cool dude, and I never had a problem with him. On the other side of me was Mrs. Sunridge, whose front yard was fenced in, as well as his long hidden driveway. His lawn always had cool patterns cut into it, rivaling those you only see at the professional baseball stadiums on the fields. Not a lot of fancy decorations on it, just a lot of security cameras and security lights. He has about 5 different vehicles which he parks in his roundabout driveway. 2 of them I've never seen because he always keeps them covered with the car covers. And the other 3, one of them is a midnight black 87 Grand Trans Am GTA, another a 2023 purple F-150 Raptor. I'm thinking he must be a engineer or something for one of the car factories, saying that wasn't available to the public at that time. And the other one I know of is a 2021 camouflage Nissan Titan XD. That's the one he seems to drive around a lot. I seen him on the road as we both left our houses at the same time to go to work every morning. We give each other that head nod when we were passing one another on the road. Never had a problem with him either. Both my neighbors were pretty cool. One weekend, Mr. Sunridge asked me to take him to pick up his new RV. So I drove him to the lot to pick it up. To my surprise, it looked like a hunk of junk. I'm like, dude. He told me they only paid $500 for it. I told him that I wouldn't have paid $5 for it. Nevertheless, it's not my money, it's his. So I followed Mr. Sunridge home as he drove that jalopy, just waiting for it to fall to pieces on the road. Miraculously, it made it to his house with no incident. I waved Mr. Sunridge by and went to my residence. When I got to my residence, it was about 6 boxes that were dropped off on my porch where were supposed to go to Mr. Sunridge. I threw them in my pickup and took them over to him. He said, perfect timing. I can get started on the restoration of this RV right away. It took him about 3 weeks, and he turned that old jalopy into a work of art. A few days later, I arrived home from work, this time to find 7 boxes addressed to Mr. Lockton, this time on my porch. Man, that delivery driver just can't get it right for nothing at all, is what I told myself. I drove this over to Mr. Lockton's, knocked on his door. He slightly opened the door and creepily looked out and said, just leave him in the driveway. I was like, cool, but that was kind of strange. Now back to the landscape. Both of their backyards were in a complete different style than their front yard. Totally contrast. There was debris everywhere. Mr. Sunridge had about 10 Connex units in his backyard, and Mr. Lockton had about 3 or 4 old school buses in his backyard with antique farm equipment and old military vehicle parts scattered throughout the yard. One Saturday morning, I woke up to a lot of ruckus going on. I come out my front door and Mr. Sunridge and Mr. Glockton are going at each other. My front lawn was full of debris, including old National Geographic magazines, empty toilet paper rolls, MRE packs, World War II memorabilia, old tires, old newspapers, empty glass jars, camouflage gear, etc. One of them had dug a foxhole in my front lawn, and I'm not sure how the roll-off dumpster got in the middle of my lawn. Expired canned food was stacked up like a fort on one end of my front yard, and I yelled at the top of my lungs, "What the heck is going on?" Then it got quiet. I heard the sound of a missile cruising through the air and going into the foxhole. Looks like a grenade. And I go, "Oh snap," and I hit the deck waiting for the explosion. None came. I stand up to see one of the gentlemen yelling, "Fire in the hole," and he throws this grenade and starts going psst with his mouth. And I'm like, these dudes are really tripping today. That grenade landed right at my doorstep, and I ran, jumped in the foxhole waiting to boom, and again, nothing happened. So I look over again, and the gentleman standing there again with his mouth, and he throws another grenade, and I'm like, okay, this one's probably a dud too. Once again, nothing's happened. So I go over to retrieve the grenade, and it's one of those toy ones that you find at the dollar store. I go over to the roll-off dumpster and jump inside, and I see Mr. Lockton hiding under a bunch of old National Geographic magazines and paper plates. I saw all these dollar store bags full of toy military weapons. He said he was leading his men in the battle. I'm like, "Mr. Lockton, dude, you got a whole bag of toy army tanks and army men. Stop tripping, and what's up with all the expired canned goods?" He replied, "You never know when you're going to have a SHTF situation." Then he offered me one of those MREs. So I ate it on my way over to the foxhole Mrs. Sandwich had dug. It was roast beef, what do you expect? And it was pretty good, by the way. I jumped in the foxhole, and Mr. Summers grabbed me and gave me that speech Bill Duke gave Carl Weathers in the first Predator movie. I'm like, bro, he ain't got nothing but a bunch of toy military items over there, and here you are in full combat gear in a foxhole in which you destroyed my African lilies to build. You got a DirecTV remote, and you keep talking into it asking for backup. What led to this? Mr. Sunridge replied, "Mr. Lockton called me a hoarder because I believed in prepping. And one night I caught him dumpster diving in the trash cans in my backyard. I called him a hoarder and gave him a warning to stay off my property. He gave me the middle finger as he jumped back over the fence with a bunch of expired canned goods and a bunch of beanie weenies I had thrown out that were expired in the garbage bag. The next day he came over saying he wanted to make peace and brought me a box of old Jet magazines with the Jet beauty pages taken out. What was I supposed to do? It was popping then.